Welcome to the Newark Regional Business Partnerships Engage and Exchange podcast. Join us for business insights and meaningful conversations with NRBP's member organizations. Thank you to our podcast host sponsor, the Martin Tuchman School of Management at NJIT. Additional support for NRBP's Engage and Exchange podcast is provided by PSEG and LISC New Jersey. Hello, I'm Verlanda Fox Nixon, President and CEO of the Newark Regional Business Partnership. We are the premier chamber of commerce for the greater Newark region. Our guest today is Alexander Elias. He's principal and founder of Alexander Elias Architecture. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start to talk about your practice, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So what would you like to share?
Well, we're doing this interview right down the street from where I went to junior high and high school at St. Benedict's. I spent most of the 80s on King Boulevard.
Okay.
Yeah, and my family has deep roots here. My mom went to Arts High next door to Benedict's. Both my parents are Rutgers Newark graduates. My father worked in Newark for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. My mom was adjunct faculty at Rutgers for 34 years. So this is kind of home base for me
That's great.
historically.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Talk about your education outside of St. Benedict.
Outside of St. Benedict's. Well, outside of St. Benedict's, nothing matters. After Benedict's, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design because there was a St. Benedict's alumnus who was an architect who was at the time when I was there, he was the school's architect. So I got to know him a little bit, and he went to RISD. Because of him, I was aware of the school. So I applied there and went there. And then 10 years after RISD, when I was living in Los Angeles, I went to UCLA for a master's.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you know you wanted to be an architect?
I knew you were going to ask this. How did I know? I never thought of doing anything else.
Really?
Yeah.
But so how? How did you know?
I always liked to draw. My mother is fond of saying I was drawing before I was walking. I don't know if that's true, but as long as I can remember, I love to draw. And a part of that was drawing buildings. A part of that was building things, which is not to say I'm mechanically inclined. I just like to put things together. And I think by the time I was 13 or 14, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I was starting to take drafting classes, any art class I could get. And we had a family friend who was an architect who, when I was 5 or 6, gave me a T-square and a triangle and some old blueprints. So I always had those things around.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
To know you're blessed, right? To have known that early in life that that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
Okay.
It's a blessing in that I've always been on a very specific path. I've never doubted it. But at the same time, I developed a really strong kind of personal relationship with my work before I entered the professional world. And adapting to the professional world after going to art college and really getting to know myself very well creatively was initially a challenge, because you have to if you have to make a living at this, you have to kind of subsume your personal desires into the work that you're required to do. And as a young architect, that was a learning process.
So talk about your career path and journey.
Well, it's really one that's been defined by geography. So I started out working in New Jersey when I was still in high school, and interned in a couple of different architecture firms while I was in college, on breaks and for credit. And when I got out of school, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. So I just came home and I started working again in New Jersey. But at that age found that there wasn't a whole lot going on here and that New York was a more exciting place to be.
Okay.
So moved to New York and got the big firm experience that a lot of architects have. And it was there that I met my wife. And she grew up in Los Angeles.
And she also is an architect.
No,
Okay.
specifically not an architect.
Okay.
At the time, it was refreshing to have someone in my life who wasn't carrying, kind of the existential creative angst on them, right? Um, no, she was a dancer who recently transitioned from dancing into advertising,
Okay.
and was from California. Was a very different person than the type of person I grew up knowing, right? So we ended up moving to California for 16 years, and that's where I first licensed. That's where I started my practice. And I had always it had always been my desire to go to graduate school, but like a lot of people, money was the issue. While living in New York, I applied to Columbia's program, and at the last minute chickened out because getting a master's in architecture is not like getting an MBA, where it's gonna double your salary. So I was taking on a lot of debt for not a lot of financial return.
Oh.
But once out in California, once I got licensed, once I started my own shop, I applied to UCLA's program as a California resident, which in those days meant that I didn't pay tuition, I just paid the fees. So I got a 2-year master's degree at UCLA for the cost of one semester at Columbia. Yeah. And I paid for it as a continuing education expense out of my business. So it was also a tax deduction.
Okay. Very smart.
Yeah. And because I was working for myself, I could fit paid work into my school schedule. So um, on all of those levels, it was the right time to do it and the right way to do it.
And then what made you decide to come to New Jersey?
Yeah, to come back. Um, well, for a long time, I'd wanted to come back. Los Angeles is a really interesting place um, to kind of study. And I wrote my master's thesis on an aspect of Los Angeles. But once I did that, I felt like I kind of knew everything I needed to know about where I was. The culture there is different. If you're from the Northeast, you either love it or hate it. And I wouldn't say that I hated it, but I can't say that I loved it. And this still felt like home. Um, so, so yeah, so with 2 kids, we kind of made the effort and took a chance and moved back here. Um, it's where I wanted my kids to grow up here, in the same kind of places I grew up for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, it was exhausting. It was tough to do. For me, it was starting over, kind of rebuilding a client base and everything. But it worked out.
So now talk about Alexander Elias Architecture, your practice and the projects that you've worked on.
Well, it's very much a practice, and I describe it that way to differentiate it from strictly being a business. Um, my experience is really broad. I've worked on every kind of project from airport terminals to train stations to office buildings to medical offices, all kinds of retail work, all kinds of residential work. I've done public contracts at the state and federal level, at the local level. So, and I've intentionally worked to have a kind of broad practice for a couple of reasons. Creatively, it's more interesting. Um, Sometimes you have to reinvent the wheel, but that keeps you engaged.
Okay.
And if any one market sector slows down, I can say that instead of doing A, I know how to do B. Right. So there's it's easier to find work. Being a one-trick pony is kind of boring in my mind. So over the years, I've accrued a very wide-ranging experience, and we're involved in projects from the initial feasibility study or zoning analysis all the way through bidding and construction. We're not just a design shop. We do all our construction drawings. Um, we are. I'm proud that I have a really good handle on building codes, legal process, entitlements. Um, my feeling is that if you want to be a creative architect, you have to have mastery of all the technical aspects of your work too, right? Because anybody can draw anything, but the end result for us is building. So yes, we are a creative practice, but we're one that prides itself on well-versed in the technical and legal aspects of architecture as well.
Okay, so can you talk to us about the projects in the greater Newark region that you are particularly proud of?
Yeah, there are a couple that come to mind, and I think of them not so much as projects, but as relationships.
Okay.
So the first that comes to mind is the United Community Corporation. They've been a client for a long time, and everything that I do for them helps support their mission, which is social services, lifting people out of poverty. I've worked on their emergency housing shelter down on Fulton Street, sober living facility on Summer Avenue. We've explored a lot of affordable housing programs that they can get involved in as builders. Uh, so that's been a really productive and meaningful relationship. Another project, this one's in Orange, is a multifamily project where the developer is the longtime property owner. He's a doctor who's been in the neighborhood for 40 years, right next to the old Orange Memorial Hospital. And he looks at this building as his family's legacy. And he's putting a lot more into it than a typical developer might because he's been a part of the community for so long. And that's knowing that, makes the project certainly more meaningful, more fun to work on.
That's great.
Yeah.
How do you get your projects? Like, how do you get your revenue?
Yeah. Referrals. You don't see architects advertising on billboards,
Right.
on TV. So as soon as I moved back here, I had to set about building a network again. And you're known by your work. You're only as good as your last project. So I endeavor to have all my clients be repeat clients. And if they're not a repeat client, they're a referral source.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we always like to end our segment with finding out from you your membership in the Newark Regional Business Partnership. How's it going for you?
Uh, it's going really well. When we moved back here 10 years ago, it was like starting fresh. And one of the first things I did was look for organizations like this to be a part of, especially with my personal and family roots in Newark. I've always felt like Newark is my home city. So I wanted to be here, be involved in what's going on, uh, and be a part of that community professionally in whatever way I could. So NRBP has been great, not only for programming, but for networking and kind of reintroducing myself to the people who are doing good things in Newark.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us, and we wish you continued success in your practice.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, I would like to leave you with a quote. The right tools can amplify your efforts and turn a good idea into a great business. From Tim Ferriss. He's an entrepreneur and investor. Thanks again for listening. Thank you for listening to NRBP's Engage and Exchange podcast. Tune in next time for more NRBP member organization insights. For more information about our organization, visit www.newarkrbp.org. Thank you again to our podcast host sponsor, the Martin Tuchman School of Management at NJIT. Additional support for NRBP's Engage and Exchange podcast is provided by PSEG and LISC New Jersey.